Well, all right, everyone. Welcome back to the Dr. Alex Show. And today's going to be cool because we have a guest in studio here in the vault, as we're calling it this afternoon. Because if you didn't know, I know on my camera, you can see behind me, you see these old radios, but behind that little display of radios is actually a wall of a vault of what used to be the post office in Lee Summit, Missouri. So we are in the ultimate, most soundproof, probably tornado-proof spot in town, other than being underground. So with that, I got my good friend and colleague, Jeremy Lotz. He's a therapist local to Lee Summit. That doesn't mean anything for anyone listening all around because he does do telehealth. And what I want to do is just bring Jeremy on and talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, talk about therapy, being a counselor, a therapist in general, but kind of focus on trauma. Because if there's a couple things that are hard to work with in office, for us, it is working with adopted children, which is usually entailing trauma. And then after that, in general, it's trauma. People are coming in with very nasty situations that they have to work through. So, with that, I guess I'm going to kind of pass this over to you, sir, and you just tell the world about you and who you are and what you do, why you do it.
Okay. Hi, world. I'm Jeremy. I finished licensure in Missouri as a licensed professional counselor in 2005. I have a cold, pardon me. My first 12 years, I worked with long-term teen residential as a level of care.
Was that
So,
Shelterwood?
Shelterwood would have been my most recent one.
Okay. We'll have to go
So,
into that. That's
I worked at 4 different programs over 12 years in 2 states, and this is long-term teen residential, so it's not a psychiatric hospital. It's not a 28-day drug rehab. Length of stay tends to be 3 to 18 months. Shelterwood was the one that I met you at.
mhm.
My last 7 years were there. And in 2017, I retired from a career in long-term residential care as a therapist and a training director. And I've been in private practice since 2017. Still specialize in adolescent issues, trauma, and Christian counseling. So I work with a lot of church folks, a lot of parents of teens, a lot of teen issues, and I have specialized training in trauma. So a lot of that too.
Awesome. You're gonna have to go into residential and Shelterwood just for a little bit. Anything you can kind of think of there, because I know that when I met you and when Lauren and I should say, met you, I didn't know Shelterwood existed until we were at that point working with the on-site brain balance center, and Shelterwood was working with the on-site brain balance center and everything that Shelterwood did. But I didn't know such a thing existed. I didn't even know such programs existed. I just thought it was medical residential. Like, let's say you have a troubled teen. I mean, they're either going off to jail, going off to military camp,
Mhm.
or they're going to medical residential and they're getting a lot of medication and they're going to be in a bed for up to 90 days, maybe 120. And that was it. But then I showed up to Shelterwood, and Nick's been familiar with the area longer. He might even know that it's off way out, basically in Buckner. It's off like Buckner Tarzany Road, and it used to be the YMCA summer camp. And so then Richard Beach, God rest his soul, bought it and turned it into not the original Shelterwood, but like the second location. And it turned into this place where mainly Christian based folks would unfortunately drop their kids off, and the teens, 12 to 18 ish, would get their schooling. They'd get their school, then they would get therapy. And it was awesome.
Right.
It was nothing but a love fest for these kids. It was great.
Yeah, I think Years ago, we would have used the term teen group home.
Okay.
People may know it. People may know the level of care that I was in as a teen group home level of care. So we have psychiatric hospitals where a teen would go if they're imminently suicidal or um, psychiatrically unstable. Teen group homes are longer term. A lot of times they're students in state custody. Parents have lost custody. Parents are working to regain custody. Um, foster care kids. Those tend to be the majority of the cases that I would have. And yeah, some programs work differently. Some have capacity to keep kids longer. But what's neat is that the teen residential level of care involves, like you said, it involves schooling, housing, recreation, therapy, um, education.
Hmm.
And so it's like a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
And you can handle really significant behavior profiles if you have all of that structure. So
Sure.
it's kind of unique. Most I think the average residential clinician works in that level of care 18 months. Um, I kind of fell in love with it early on back when I was in grad school, working on the weekends at a local teen shelter called Synergy House out of Parkville. And I worked on the weekends, 4 to midnight to get money for books,
Mm.
tuition. While I was doing my graduate work at UMKC. And I'm like, this is really cool. Excuse me. It's super legit being able to like drink Mountain Dew and help kids do their kitchen chores
Hmm.
and chew on donated pastries from Price Chopper uh, until midnight and then go home. And so that's actually a part-time weekend gig is what catapulted me into. I'm like, "Well, I got to figure out a way to keep working with inpatient teenagers as a real adult.
Hmm.
Like when I'm not in school anymore, I got to find a way to do this and get my licensure hours. And I stayed 12 years, and so it's fun. It's created a strong toolbox to help the spiciest of teens.
Yeah. I think because I have a I have a Lauren and I have a heart for all of the particularly the kids we work with, including teens. But it's a the way I put it is like it's a different heart. And for the teens, it really tugs on the heartstrings because they're supposed to be in one of the most exciting points in their life where they're supposed to have that premature prefrontal cortex that's making them think they can handle the world. They're supposed to be thinking like I can run the country better than Joe Biden, right? Like they're thinking they can do
Right.
it all, right? Yet at the same time, they're supposed to be somewhat supposed to be making minorly dumb decisions and learning the hard way here and there. But when it's just all the time and it's recurring, there's something about you get to do it more, but there's something about when you're in a room with a kid, a teenager, and they're having a hard time and they might be crying or they might be like just taking a break because we're doing brain based exercises. Sit down next to them and say, bro, what's going on? And when they say nothing, you say, bull crap. Tell me what's going through that head. And when they open up, it takes you back and brings you back into their perspective
Right.
on what is going through their head because they have things coming from all different directions and they don't know what is going on. And there's just something about it. I think that's
Yeah.
why I fell in love with Shelterwood.
Yeah. Teenagers, their imaginations are super active. They have strong opinions. They seem to live pretty actively out of their limbic system.
Mhm.
And so they're sensitive to criticism. Their emotions are large. Um, Prefrontal cortex doesn't finish until 25, 27. So they struggle with self restraint. That whole HR department
Hmm.
is last to come online.
That's a good way to put it.
But I don't, these days, I don't see, I'm a, just a soft outpatient therapist these days. I'm not de escalating kids. Um,
Yeah.
I had one, I had a preteen that I tried to help him. He stole mom's phone on the way to my office. So I kind of clocked back in to some residential strategies to help him give the phone back to mom. But yeah, these days a lot of the limbic piece will be me trying to help parents know how to de-escalate a teen when they're limbic. And so much of that is just depriving them of sensory inputs. Parents talk too much when a kid is active, escalated, let's say.
Mhm.
The fresher the wounds, the fewer the words. So if I can get a kid to have their iPod or their iPhone, their playlist, cool water, outside, following them at a brief distance, um, you can de-escalate practically anybody.
Mm.
But what keeps kids limbic the most, and maybe you should probably unpack for your audience what limbic means, is sensory inputs through speech. Because if the limbic system is on, then this is off, right?
Yeah.
And because kids are so sensitive to criticism and they feel evaluated so quickly, they need time, often like 30 minutes, for this to cool off so that this can have a chance. And so it's a whole lot of really counterintuitive things that you'd use to de-escalate a teen because the rest of the world doesn't function like this. Like at work, we're dealing with it's my prefrontal cortex and your prefrontal cortex having a conversation.
Mhm.
And that's what we do. And so if you're an engineer or a teacher, you're poorly equipped by your workday to negotiate a person who lives primarily out of a different brain region.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the short answer, believe it or not, to why parenting teens can be so hard. Because by the time we have teens, our prefrontal cortex is generally finished and we're pursuing a career that we like, and the muscles we use get stronger. And teens become increasingly incompatible as a roommate by the time you're an old head with teens.
Yeah.
So it's easy to have compassion for parents of teenagers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, oh, you just hit the nail on the head. On so you said it maybe unpack limbic, the and prefrontal cortex. The thing is people are smarter than I think we give people credit for. If you don't know what Jeremy's saying or what he means when he says limbic or prefrontal, your limbic system is where your emotions are. It involves what we call lower brain centers. And the way that we're designed, the way that what I like to say, he wired us is when we are in that stage, like you had said, where we're limbic, we're in these emotional centers. And exactly our prefrontal cortex, what makes us human. Other animals don't have frontal lobes. And if they do, they're smaller. So they don't have as much capacity, which is why we talk and we reason and we build skyscrapers and we can create art and we can sit here and pot in old vaults and do podcasts and other animals can't. So when we are in that limbic center, the prefrontal cortex, limbic center, sorry, the prefrontal cortex shuts down, all like quite literally turns into a different wavelength, It's not operating at the same level, and you have to give it time to come back. So the question is like, well, why? Why would it be like that? I don't know. That's It'd be a lot easier if we can just go right back to prefrontal cortex and ration through, but we're not. But also, these kids, they don't have a fully working prefrontal cortex. It's why we can sit here and go weeks on end and have daily insults to life, changes in routine, changes in schedule, upside down things that just things off routine that can be aggravating. And some adults break down eventually. Some adults break down more often. Um, but with kids, it's more frequent because that frontal lobe's not there to say, "Bro, it's okay.
Right.
It is okay."
Well, yeah, that's really well said. The only frontal lobe that the kid has a chance to gain access to is mom or dad's, you know?
Mm,
That's one reason why I try to get parents to be quiet when their kid is super loud.
that is such a gold mine. I'm so taking that from you.
I it, stop talking sooner is the number one tool to help calm a kid's limbic system.
And just let them go at it, huh?
Yeah, and if you know, I've been called everything. If you know as a grown up why they're mad, they're like, oh, this is their there's basically a neurological hurricane. I've always kind of wanted to test that metaphor with you. Um, Going on, if a kid is going from 0 to 100 and they're at, 80, 100 or whatever, all the whole object of the parent needs to become sensory deprivation. I stop talking, I sit, I leverage the therapy of presence. I give them some space. I might sit down next to them. I don't say anything. And they can borrow function, as it's kind of called sometimes. And, but, if you have a step parent who's got a strong justice button and they don't like that their significant other is getting railroaded by the teen, this happens a lot. And so the step parent powers up and you're not going to talk to my girlfriend that way or your mom that way or whatever. And you're bringing it's limbic on limbic. Who do you think's going to win? The
Yeah.
young person who doesn't have to play by the rules or the grown up who has to play by the rules?
Yeah. And who's gonna be the more stubborn one anyway?
Right.
So,
Yeah, you can't win an argument with a teenager,
yeah.
but you can refuse to participate and you can listen. Teenagers don't need us to always agree with them the way we often think they do. They need us to listen. Teenagers tolerate disagreement way better than grown-ups. Um, Teenagers are way easier to work with than their parents because teenagers make crappy roommates.
Hmm.
By the time you have them, you're like, man, these kids are gross. They stink. They're dirty. They're lazy. They don't pick up anything. They're super egocentric. All they care about is their girlfriend or their boyfriend and their phone. I'm like, yeah, you're right. By the time we have teenagers, we experience them primarily as really inconsiderate roommates.
Yeah. Yes.
But they're more. They're philosophers, they're politicians, they're leaders.
They're artists.
Teenagers, they're artists. Teenagers teach me more about loyalty and determination in the social realm than adults ever could.
Oh,
And then
yes.
if you can use like the Jedi mind trick of like a teenager asking a teenager what advice, like, oh, you have to kind of backdoor your way in. a lot of times if a teenager's not gonna talk because a lot of times their emotional vocabulary is limited, they're disconnected because of trauma, so they're not super aware of how they think or feel. But if you if you have a kid going through something difficult, like with a let's say a acrimonious relationship with a teacher or a coach that she or he thinks plays favorites, if you ask them directly, they often will just be like, "Oh, I don't know, she just doesn't like me. Coach just doesn't like me, or the teacher just doesn't listen." But everything changes if the teenager can be asked, like, "Well, have you ever had any friends that have been in this situation like this?" I don't know. If you did, what do you think they would do? And then be like, "Well, I would just tell them to drop the class." Okay, I hear you. But if you couldn't, what do you think what do you think they could do? They Teenagers give great advice to other teenagers. That's part of the beauty of the program style I worked in so long.
Mhm.
It's called milieu therapy. I think milieu is like a French word for atmosphere. And milieu therapy was like the living room. And you have kids doing a check-in group after school, eating at the, dining room table, doing homework. It's like the brain center of the group home unit. And the staff would just look at each other. We would hear truth bomb after truth bomb after truth bomb
Mm.
as they're giving each other's feedback. And that's a big part of group home treatment, harnessing the feedback and observations of teenagers to give to the other residents.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
it's fun.
Yeah,
Teenagers are cool. Other people's teenagers are cool.
yeah,
I haven't had my own yet.
yeah.
So
I know. I was about to say mine's I got more years until being a teen, but
but I have some really legit parents I'll be calling,
oh,
that I've
absolutely.
worked with, because you can do everything right as a parent of a teenager and still have most things be going wrong.
Yeah.
Because it's a incredibly challenging circumstance
Mhm.
to have an old head live with a teenager and then to have to implant values and responsibility and to set limits as they're using their prefrontal cortex more and more and they're pushing for autonomy and independence and individuation. You're having to have conversations about car insurance and curfew and phone and porn blockers and weed and everything else. So it's a tough spot to have to be an authority figure with somebody whose brain is so combustible
Yeah.
when you haven't experienced that your whole workday.
Yeah. You haven't been there for, what it could be 20, 30, 40 years,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hurricane, neurological hurricane is probably the best way to put it in a way.
Nice.
I mean, seriously, that thing, because what's funny is you can see a hurricane coming, right? And then it's just picking up steam and it's still coming. And let's just say, for argument's sake, that hurricane wants to be on land. It wants to come to you. It wants some help
Ooh, yeah.
because it might slow down when it gets to land, right? Not all the time. The really bad ones just keep going and keep storming along, but it wants to come, and then sometimes it dangles back off, and then it's just out there, just all alone, just getting more what I call pissed, just getting just stirring up more, and then it's coming back. That's actually a great metaphor.
Nice. I'll keep it.
That is fantastic.
What else have I wanted to vet by you? Can't remember.
You know
Anything?
what? While you're thinking, what I wanted to pass by you is for Lee Summit Cares. I know Nick knows this, and I guess for the Rotary Club, I get to give a small talk tomorrow. one of the things I'm gonna ask them is I'm gonna open up the conversation with I don't whoever the room's gonna be filled with. It's gonna be at the police station of all places, and it's gonna be filled with a bunch of adults. They may have teenagers, may not. They might be community leaders. They might not be. I'm not sure who it is. But I'm going to ask them when in your life, as long as they had a good childhood, decent, let's just call it decent, halfway decent. When in your life were you the most optimistic, the most creative, the most ready to take on life and ready to handle the world's problems? When you were 12, 13, 14, 15.
Mm.
And then what I'm also going to bring up, and I'll have to see what you think about this, is something with our parents that we work with, and now it's actually a red flag. Like because these kids in our office never do good. Is when a parent comes in and they're dragging their kid in, they'll say that they'll sit across the room from me, and they're just at some point they're just going to argue, and it's not that I'm playing therapist. It's because we're having a consultation to see if they're a fit.
Right.
The kid wants help. The parents want help. So that's the biggest thing about coming in for that consult. But then what happens is they go, mom will say, tell you what, if you go out Friday night and you get picked up by the cops, don't call me. And I think that that is a huge subconscious no no. The fact that their parents are not always in their court,
Right.
if that makes sense. Like some parents say, oh, it's going to be the biggest lesson. They can go sit in jail. No, no, no. You can make their life way more miserable than sitting in some county or city jail for the night because you can make them scrub the tile on the floor for 6 months for that $500 bail money and make their life absolutely miserable. But always, to me, that is a huge one. For some reason, always, always, always be in the court of your kid.
Yeah. That parent that parent is very frustrated,
Yeah.
and with really good reason. If parenting teens is exhausting. But I agree with you. I'm a huge fan. I've seen with social media, you'll see these slides that therapist influencers um, will publish, and it'll say like, um, if my child sends me a snow cone emoji, it means pick me up, and I'll do so, no questions asked. I'm a much more of a fan of that because the greatest green flag, we know about red flags, but the greatest green flag or protective factor against teen depression and suicide is having an approachable relationship with a caregiver. And that can be a parent. Parent has the best shot, but it can be anybody whose brain is over 25. And the legal system can be unpredictable, and I wouldn't want to chance my kid getting a ride on getting a ride home with somebody. People are vaping weed. Vape weed is so much more potent than like what students might call bud, where
Hmm.
you like roll it up and smoke a joint or whatever. People don't really do that a lot anymore unless they're just kind of a stalwart for the old school nostalgia. A lot of my teen boys will do it for those reasons. They're like, oh, I just like the experience smoking a joint. But by and large, most people are vaping marijuana, which is way stronger generally. And if you're getting it from, you know, dispensaries, it's often going to be stronger. And so knowing all this stuff, I'm like, I don't, I only got two bad choices. I get up and go get my kid when I'm mad, or I roll the dice on somebody else doing it. Auto accidents by far are the leading cause of death among teenagers. So I would I would definitely validate that parent's frustration, but if you're getting a call that your kid's arrested or they're in trouble, you're gonna be limbic,
Mhm.
and it's best to just be quiet, listen, and then get there.
Yeah.
And if you can't get there because you're super fed up, um, send somebody else to go there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I just see some pretty consistently unpredictable reactions out of um, the public authorities that interact with teens.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a safe way of putting that. And okay, so you brought up anxiety and depression. And since we're on teens, talk about COVID and what it did to people, but teens in general.
So COVID was hard. It was really hard on teens. Um, there's a lot that could be said. Uh, Teens were probably the hardest demographic I think to shelter in place with.
Mhm.
Teens struggle more than any other demographic at measuring risk versus reward. So, and again, that's a brain thing. It's not a character flaw. Um, a lot of teens underestimated the harm of COVID
Yeah.
when compared to their parents. So parents are feeling responsible of keeping the kid inside or keeping the kid, you know, masked up or whatever. But teens are inherently challenged at appreciating risk. So that was really hard. And then it was tough, the social piece. The three kind of developmental processes I really try to leverage with high school students and excuse me, with middle school students, if I can, depending upon their age, developing a peer network. So friends that the parents feel good about. Two, driving, getting that started. And three, getting a job. Um, those three rites of passage that are super useful in maturation all got walloped
Yeah.
during COVID. Um, so I was reading COVID, according to the World Health Organization, increased depression and anxiety of everybody by 25% globally,
Gosh,
which is a lot. Um,
man.
but um, there were just a lot of circumstantial challenges. Um, it was kind of it was just like everything that could go wrong. You have a contagious, invisible global plague
Mhm.
that's airborne, and we already are far too dialed into technology. Um, so we're already supercharging our left hemisphere, which, if I understand it, is our gas pedal, whereas our right hemisphere would be our brake pedal. And now we're online all the time, and we're doom scrolling,
Yeah.
and you know the parts of the brain that govern parasympathetic are getting starved, and the parts of the brain that really can get supercharged with anxiety, with hypervigilance, are getting activated. So we're basically all activated. I remember when the world opened up, COVID, like post COVID driving is so much worse
No.
than pre COVID driving.
Yes.
And I haven't like seen a random controlled study on this, but we we just became more primitive. I feel like road rage has been in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, since 2013. But road rage has increased tremendously, and you know, So yeah, it was just really a amplifier of everything. I think I've seen some educators say that a lot of students lost 1 to 3 years of emotional development during the hot and heavy COVID
Yeah.
season.
Probably depending on the age of the kid,
What
for
would you
sure.
think?
Oh, for sure. Just based on our metrics we use, depends on the age of the kid. If we have a 4-year-old, for instance, that was born in 2020, like we've had 4 and 5-year-olds come in lately. Things come in waves. We have all these little 5-year-old dudes, little dudes coming in, boys, and little they are little autistic balls of fire.
Uh,
But they are extra anxious. They're more anxious than their counterparts are 4 years ago.
wow.
And then for the 8-year-olds, uh, they act a lot like 4-year-olds, and you got life shut down. And then for all the parents that are listening who are like, I'm the I'm the stay-at-home mom, my kid went to private school that didn't shut down, or I'm homeschooled and all that stuff, our lives didn't change. Okay, your life didn't change, but don't think for a second your depressions and your anxieties and your worries of life and what was going to happen. Don't think that that did not rub off on your kids, and don't think that that stress did not affect your kids,
That's a good point.
because it did. And if you were just completely utterly relaxed about the entire situation, then you need the Nobel Peace Prize and you have to share your secrets.
Right. Well, and then the number one thing that teenagers tell me is that their parents are too stressed. Their biggest stressor is their parents' stress. Number
Oh,
one, my parents are too stressed. Number two, my household's too busy. And number three, my parents are always on their phone.
oh,
Those three are so common in that order. I don't even know what fourth place would be.
oh my gosh.
And then I guess fourth place, which is kind of similar, would be like I'm just never at home. I'm always at practice. Practices, man. It's There's been such a professionalization of child sports. Kids kids go to practice from 3 to 8, 3 to 9 sometimes. I know, and I'm pro band, I'm pro sports, but um you and I have both had students who are in a local band, a local marching band.
Hmm.
And so there's some super competitive marching bands in our area.
Yeah.
And parents are like, "Hey, I need you to work with my kid this summer." They're in band practice 3 to 9, 5 days a week.
Man.
Like 3 to 9. Gee whiz. So, yeah, but there was a adult adult anxiety and adult depression would be a huge problem for teenagers during those years because it already is. We, you know, a goal I have for all parents whose kid is in services with me is that that parent would get a fitness tracker and begin to log 30 minutes of moderate exercise 5 days a week. So you hit the 150,
Yeah.
which is 30 minutes 5 days a week, or you could do 22 minutes 7 days a week, if that math is right. But that's what the World Health Organization recommends for general health and wellness. I think
Sure.
the CDC does too. And by the time your family's out of my office, there's been a steady pattern of everyone getting those numbers because sleep and exercise are the only two wonder drugs that really exist in mental health.
Yeah.
And most people who are on psychotropic meds that I work with, which I am for, in lots of ways, are I'd say 80 to 90% of adults who are coming to me for individual adult counseling or have a plan to work off of those meds because of cost, side effect, philosophy, etc.
Hmm.
And same is true in reference to their kids. And medicating a teen brain is way harder. You're hitting a moving target.
Yeah.
So you've got hormones, puberty, body weight, body height, all those things can radically alter a child's experience of a particular med. And so sleep and exercise, boy, and The average teenager in America gets 6.5 hours of sleep, if I recall, and they need between, I don't know, 8.5 and 10, um, something like that. I don't remember. I use the National Sleep Foundation as my reference. I'm away from my handouts and such in the vault.
Sure. So yeah, that brings up a good point. People are always, because we're doom scrolling, because we're online, they're always looking for the magic bullet. If you walked in our office lately, which I know you have, you'll see that that supplement shelf is getting more and more dwindled. Is that because we're not selling them? No, it's because people are coming in buying their own thing already, because what they're doing is they're finding the latest and greatest whatever it is product out there, and they're like, this is going to help with my brain fog, my attention, my some of my traits with autism, some of my depression, my anxiety, whatever it is, my adrenal fatigue, you name it, my digestion. This is going to help me. And especially when it comes to psychological based problems like depression, anxiety, they're really doing this. So what my whole point there is they come in and it doesn't work, and then the first two things that'll be out of our mouth is sleep and exercise. And the reason we say this is because there's no two things on this planet that's going to better metabolize stress hormones appropriately than sleep and exercise. We're designed to move and we're designed to sleep. And it's kind of weird, but sometimes, especially adults, and it's odd for me to say this as, how old am I, 37, to older adults. Sometimes adults need permission to sleep. They like they need to hear it from someone. And if you got to have therapist behind your name or "der" in front of your name, they have to hear, go home,
Right.
and it is okay to leave the house a wreck, and it is okay to crawl in bed with your kid, who cares, and sleep and fall asleep by 8 o'clock, not 11. And then you can wake up at 6 and be okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do in this area. I have supervised therapists since 2007, 2006. Um, Oftentimes, teenagers or parents or individual adults have gone to numerous therapists before me, and no one's ever mentioned sleep. Um, Therapists are notorious for not helping parents and their clients in general assess the client's use of alcohol and sleep issues and exercise. A
Ooh,
lot of that is projection or imposter syndrome, where therapists unfortunately tend to be relatively unhealthy people, um, and that's sad. Um, I think it's multi-layered. I think therapists are often um, empaths, and if you're an empath, you can overgive faster.
sure.
Um,
Yeah, I can
I've
see
worked
that.
when I've supervised therapists numerous times who um, overgive. It's easy to overgive as a therapist. I, I'm there too. the The primary criticism I got in employee evals during my career, when you have all those, was
Hmm,
self care, not working too hard. You can't work harder than the client. You've got to take time for you. You've got to rest and recharge. Therapists are often bad at that. And because alcohol works so quote unquote effectively and so fast, a lot of therapists drink, and so do a lot of MDs. When I work with a therapist, a doctor, or a lawyer, they they use alcohol to an excessive degree at least 75% of the time, based on what we know as the guidelines for moderate alcohol use.
yeah.
But yeah,
We can and we can freely talk about that, and there is no judgment because you're hearing from a dude that had to give it up. So when when Jeremy says that, people, it's when it becomes something that you have to have, it just calms me down. That right there, by most people's definition, if not all, is a problem. And I'm not talking to Nick, who has a beer podcast, because he enjoys
Ooh,
critiquing and the taste of beer.
that's
Yeah,
cool.
it's actually a really cool podcast. That's not the case. You're enjoying the alcohol for what it is. It's there to be enjoyed, not to be used as a drug.
Right.
Same with the marijuana, which is now getting medically or recreationally legalized, just state after state. And that it's not to go down a political or legal route, but now it's getting used more and more. Really good example is a new dentist comes in the office, stressed to the gills, new kid, relationship not too happy, has to have $5,000 of functional medicine workup done. And at the very end, she spits out, I use marijuana at night and I eat until I fall asleep. Wake up and wash, rinse, repeat. I was like,
It's so hard.
So here's the thing. In our office, we don't make money on testing. I can give you all this, but it ain't gonna work. It's time to buck up. We got to get you some
Yeah.
help here. Like we got to figure this out because you can't be relying on it, especially for your baby and all that jazz. It's
It's hard.
hitting the nail on the head. It's
There's
uncomfortable.
Yeah, and there's nothing harder to help somebody with. For me, I've navigated addiction issues with clients my whole career. Um, alcohol is it's a different animal entirely.
Yeah.
It's so available. It's got a unlimited marketing war chest,
Yeah.
which no other substance has.
It's not like
And I drink. I'm
tobacco.
not some, I don't know,
Holier than thou. Yeah.
alcohol person.
Sure.
But I think the best tool in mental health for me of the last 10 years is a Fitbit brand tracker, because you can see trends in your sleep and exercise levels. You can get your average heart rate. You can see after you've had too much to drink, your heart rate is elevated for 18 to 36 hours. And you can see how you feel on the weeks where you hit 150 or 200 zone minutes. And alcohol decimates REM sleep. And REM sleep is for memory and mood.
It just shuts it down.
And so it's really useful to, unfortunately, I'm not a gadget guy, but Apple Watches, for example, I think generally just track data for yesterday.
Yep.
It has seemed like, even with my IT engineering clients, they had to get a Fitbit brand device in order to get handles on their data at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year.
Sure.
And it's useful. It's half of what I've replaced me with when clients graduate services. Because if they can track their sleep and their exercise, they're largely going to stay out of my office.
So that is just monstrously huge. A particular brand I like that I don't have it yet, because you have to pay a yearly subscription, and I just hate subscriptions. So I want to try to find another one, but it's called Whoop.
Right. That's the Mahomes one.
Yeah. Yeah. Mahomes has got it. Everyone buy it. But it's awesome because it does heart rate variability.
Right. So does Fitbit.
Oh, it does.
Right. But Whoop is, I would imagine Whoop is better. I know it's more advanced. I've seen a lot of elite athletes like Whoop, and then there's Aura, OURA.
Yep, Aura
there's
Ring.
the Ring or
Yep.
something. I'm a dad bod in their 40s. I don't need to pay for a subscription to Whoop. I don't need to be doing the same thing as Mahomes.
Yeah. I don't.
But Fitbit's been good enough. I do like the premium subscription because it gives me deeper analytics with sleep, with heart rate variability.
Well, that's good to know about Fitbit.
With the restoration score. There's a stress score that's useful.
Yeah.
There's a electrodermal assessment where you can just hold the two little biofeedback pieces for 4 minutes and practice your deep breathing.
Hmm.
Um, it's really it's really useful for my clients.
Just a kind of a fun fact, a place, maybe you heard of it, a place that did a lot of initial research on all these devices and all of this work is HeartMath, heartmath.org. They, uh, what they did is they initially had devices that would help you with your breathing that would clip onto your ear or, their devices are awesome. Not as consumer ready for
Okay,
us, I don't think. But anyway, yeah, if people want more resources, is
that's interesting.
HeartMath's pretty
I
awesome.
think I saw that at a training this last year at a conference. I know neurofeedback clinicians have used those platforms.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, I guess we're kind of wrapping up. You got anything you want to talk about in regards to trauma? Anything else that's just on your mind? You got on some really good soapboxes there. So if you're rolling, you just let it go.
Well, you were asking about before we started how clients are coming in telling you that they've had small t or big T trauma,
Oh yeah.
which, I think I'm in, I don't know. I don't want to do math. I've been seeing clients weekly in therapy since 2003. And I didn't know of those terms until a few years ago, 5 years ago at the most. But with the TikTokification of mental health, um, people will come in and tell you what they have. But there are two, I only follow two therapist influencers, and I recommend these two. There are others, of course, that are good, but I try not to be on my phone a lot after hours. So um, I like Nate Postlewaite. It's like Postlwaite. Nate Postlewaite. He is not a therapist, but he is a content creator that develops really legitimate content on people who had child trauma histories.
Mm,
I share a lot of his slides on my socials. The other one I really like is Patrick Tian, Tehan. His handle is Patrick Tian Therapy. He's a therapist like me he's out of Mass on the East Coast, and he specializes in helping people understand toxic family environments when they were little, which he came out of
mm,
per his own admission. So I like those two, but generally TikTok is the worst colleague I've ever had.
yeah.
And um, but small T trauma would mean like a single incident trauma, a car accident, um, a divorce. Often could be a low T trauma if both parents are mainstream and really functional.
Hmm.
Um, Often divorce can graduate to being a big T trauma. Big T trauma basically means more enduring. You have a stronger severity and duration of symptoms. Um, Small T trauma would be something more circumstantial. Um, 66% of people who are exposed to an incident of trauma will never qualify for PTSD. That's important. Um,
Good point.
and that includes, sexual assault. But so we have this weird, wonky, co- like dynamic with trauma. 1 out of 3 women worldwide have been sexually or physically abused, generally by an intimate partner. That's gigantic.
Jeez.
1 out of 3 women worldwide is still the case. It's the most dangerous place for a woman in the United States or in the world is in her own home. So trauma is way more common than depression and anxiety, but it tends to get misdiagnosed as depression or anxiety because trauma only gets recognized by its symptoms. And the essence of trauma is basically hyperarousal. You stay stuck in fight or flight. And so you are hypervigilant. You can't relax. Um, you don't trust people. You can't slow down. Um, But I wish a lot more therapists would study trauma. Um, Trauma requires physical interventions with sleep, with exercise. You can't talk your way out of trauma. You can't talk your way out of hyperarousal. You can't cognitive behavior therapy your way into a nervous system that wasn't exposed to trauma. We have to use neuro protocols and whole foods, not whole foods, not the store necessarily,
Hmm.
but um, I do this pyramid where I draw a pyramid like this, and sleep is at the bottom because if sleep is trash, nothing will get better. Exercise is second, and nutrition's on top. I am not a sleep doctor, a personal trainer, or a nutritionist, but I've studied enough of each to know that we can leverage a lot of homework assignments between counseling sessions to make big gains in those things. And if I have a client who wants to do eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, which is the best practice modality for trauma protocols, the first step in trauma recovery is stabilization. If you if your sleep is trash, you don't want to do trauma processing because trauma processing is destabilizing. The three steps of trauma recovery is stabilization and then processing and then integration. But we're all so unhealthy. I don't crave broccoli.
Hmm.
I crave wine and donuts like the next guy. But it's just harder than ever, I think, to be unhealthy. And there are a lot of things that can mask the underlying issue, which might be unresolved child trauma or um, a past relationship that ended tragically that you never got over. Um, we tend to not deal with our trauma until it's owning us.
Sure. Till it becomes part of us, it defines us.
Right. When you become the social pariah,
Yep.
when you keep losing jobs, when you can't fall asleep without THC or alcohol, um, when you have health issues, high blood pressure, things like that.
Yep.
So that's kind of a soapbox to the third power.
Love it. Love it. Well, I didn't find a good spot to plug these lasers, so y'all are gonna have to listen to me plugging our lasers. And if you already haven't heard it, our shed light lasers. I know Jeremy's seen these just laying around the
Yeah,
office.
you used them on me, man.
Absolutely, everyone gets light in the office. So these things are effective in everything we just talked about, because someone comes in with low back pain, we're going to use a laser. Someone comes in with trauma, we're going to use a laser. Where would we use a laser on trauma? We're going to use them prefrontal cortex. We're going to put it on their vagus nerve. We're going to make sure that that vagus nerve is happy. If someone comes in with anxiety, well, anxiety is usually a runaway right prefrontal cortex, not doing good. It's that hurricane that's just swirling away off the Gulf Coast. Or depression. Sometimes it's that left side of that prefrontal cortex. Same thing. We're going to laser away. And much love to Dr. Griswold, who owns Shed Light Cold Lasers, and now his other gentleman who's helping him out, Josh Harper. Anyone who wants to run lasers either in clinic, who are allowed to with their various licensures as professionals, or even at home, anyone can buy these things. It is an investment, but it's a health investment that will pay in spades. These things come with us everywhere. We just did a trip down to Houston and back. Laser came with. We did another road trip before that. Laser came with. It goes in my pocket nowadays when I just travel and I just drop it in the bin when I go through TSA. They ask me what it is, and it's a medical laser device, and they don't know anything after that, and they just let me go. So anyway, everyone, shedlightcoldlasers.com. Got to check it out. Sir, thank you for coming in. This was a lot of fun.
appreciate it.
I can keep going. So thank you again. We'll have to do it again. But anyway, everyone, we'll talk to you guys later. You got any words to send everyone off with?
No, it's been fun.
Awesome. All right, guys, we'll talk to you later.